So let's pray. Oh God, pour out your Holy Spirit onto each one of us gathered here in this space, in this moment. Fill our hearts, our minds, our eyes, our ears with an overwhelming sense of you. May all that we speak and hear and think be pleasing to you, be about you, and use these moments to draw us closer to you and to Christ and to the neighbors you've given us. We ask all these things through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Our scripture reading today is a gospel reading. It comes from Matthew chapter 7. It's a tradition in the church at the reading of the gospel often to stand, so I'd like to ask you, if you would, to please rise for the reading of our gospel lesson. Now, this comes from the Sermon on the Mount, which is one of my favorite passages of Bible. It's really kind of the core, the heart of Jesus' teachings from Matthew 5 through Matthew 7. Sometimes people will ask me, Daniel, where do I need to start in the Bible to get to know the Bible, to get to know Jesus? I always say Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7. Fantastic place to begin. And this is part of that. Matthew 7, verses 15 through 20. Jesus says, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorns, or figs from thistles? In the same way, every good tree bears good fruit, but the bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus you will know them by their fruits." This is the word of God for us, the people of God. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. As we're taking our seats, I want to begin the message time today with an unapologetic, blatant moment of self-promotion. Are you okay for an unapologetic, blatant moment of self-promotion? Is this okay with you? All right. And that is, if you feel like you might be inclined to play board games, or if you think that maybe something that you'd like to learn more about, I want to invite you to our board game group that I lead on Wednesday nights at 6:30 p.m. in the gym here at Campebell United Methodist Church. We have a great time. We would love to see you there. Some of you know this about me already, but I am a big believer in board game groups at church. There are 3 reasons for this. Number 1, board games are awesome, right? And that's a whole other sermon and a whole other series, but it's just true, right? Number 2, it's a big relief to my dear wife, Kristen, because she gets really tired of me asking her to play board games all the time, right? But then number 3, and this is the more important reason, I have seen board games possess the capacity to bring people together from across all sorts of divides, right? I've seen board game groups bring together retirees and college students, right? Where else do you see groups that bring together retirees and college students? I've seen board games bring together women and men. I've seen board games bring together very wealthy people and people living in poverty. I've seen board games bring together single people and married people. I've seen board games bring together staunch Republicans and staunch Democrats, right, who all enjoy playing the same game together. I've seen board games bring together people from a diversity of racial, ethnic backgrounds. I've seen board games bring together people from a variety of disabilities. And I've seen board games bring together people who are inside the church and outside the church. And that's where I want to begin today. I want to tell you a story about a friend of mine who came from outside our church to our board game group. Now, not this church. I'm talking about another church where I was that had another board game group. I'm going to call my friend Josh. That's not his name, but that's what we'll use today. He gave me permission to share his story with you this morning. So Josh was not involved in our church or any church at all, but one night he showed up at our board game group at our church. A couple of friends had invited him. And he very quickly became a core member of that that group. He was there every week. He had fun. He is such, and still is such a sweet man, right? A dear soul. And you know he had to be an awesome guy because he consistently won every game he played, and yet everybody still liked him, right? And that's a hard balance to keep, right? To win every game and still everybody likes you. You know he had to be pretty awesome at that. Well, one night after several months of coming, Josh asked me if he could share his story with me. And I said, yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to hear your story. And so he began to share a story with me. And he told me that he actually grew up in the church. He had been in the church his whole life, very active in the church. But then he got into his early 20s. And in his early 20s, he said he began to feel kind of unsettled, right? And he started to feel more and more unsettled until eventually he said he had a revelation. He said he realized one day that he was gay, right? And he's gay. And I wish you could have been there when he was telling me the story, because when he shared that moment of revelation with me, when he told me that moment, he smiled, he had tears in his eyes, and he said, when I finally admitted that to myself, I had such a sense of God loving me and Jesus loving me, because I felt like I wasn't pretending to be somebody else anymore. And he said that moment meant so much to me, I wanted to share it. I wanted to share it with the church where I was going at the time and with the pastor. He said, so I went to talk with the pastor of that church where I was going at the time. And I told him about this moment where I realized I was gay and how I had this sense of God's love for me in that. And the pastor, in response, immediately removed Josh from every ministry that he was involved in the church. And then the next Sunday preached a sermon against Josh, a veiled sermon, right? He didn't use his name, but Josh knew he was talking about him. And you can imagine Josh he was devastated, right? He was devastated. And he told himself then that he would never go back to church again. He would never step foot in a church again. And he didn't. Until several years later, when some of his friends who were members of our church told him about this board game group, right? And he said, well, maybe a board game group would be a safe place to begin. Right? That's why I love having board game groups in church. Right? So, well, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you. So today is week 3 in our series, Love You Springfield, right? You see a lot of shirts around the sanctuary today, Love You Springfield. And on our 3rd week for today, our subject is persons in our community who are LGBTQ+. And this is on the next slide. There we go. Thank you. And just as a little reminder of how we got here today. Back on July 7th, I asked the congregation a question. I said, who's not here? And who do you believe God is calling us especially to share the love of God with, to share the love of Jesus with in Springfield? How can we love you, Springfield, really well, right? And you turned in a lot of votes, hundreds of votes. It was awesome. We tallied all of those votes, put them all together. We took the top 5 vote getters to build this series around. And one of the top 5 vote getters, the second highest group, was people who are LGBTQ+ in our community, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender plus. Now, because that's how the topic for today came about, because it is a suggestion that you, the congregation, made in response to the question, how can we love better? How can we show the love of Christ better? I want to let you know that today's sermon is not going to be a sermon where I go through, all of the different verses in the Bible dealing with same-sex relations. There's a handful. There's not a lot. There's a few. It's not a sermon where I'm going to be talking about how to interpret or not interpret this verse or that verse or that verse. I have preached that sermon before. If you want to hear it, it's on YouTube. Just speak with Glee afterwards. Glee has one of these shirts on, too. She's going to be out in the fellowship hall. And she will take down your name, and later on this week, I'll send you a link to watch that video on YouTube. if you're like so bored you want to put up with 2 Daniel Hilty sermons this week, I can send you that link if you're interested. But that's not the focus today, talking about verses in the Bible, what the Bible may or may not say about same-sex relations. The focus today is the question that got it all started, which was, how can we love really well our neighbors that God has given us? Because I think all of us can agree, no matter how we may read or interpret one particular verse or another, that is God's call to all of us, right? To love really well all of the neighbors that God has given us in Springfield in the name of Jesus Christ, including persons who are LGBTQ plus. And so how do we do that? How do we go about loving really well in the name of Christ? Well, Jesus gives us some really helpful tools to think about it. Jesus says this. He says, think about it in terms of fruit, right? In our scripture reading today, Matthew chapter 7, 15 through 20. Jesus says, think about it in terms of fruit. Does an idea, a ministry, a church, a leader, is it bearing good fruit or is it bearing bad fruit, right? Now, fruit can mean a lot of different things. I think in this instance, I think it's probably safe to assume, and we all probably would agree, that good fruit is something that helps people experience the love of God, the love of Christ, the love of the church in their lives, right? Good fruit means that they are closer to God and Jesus and the church at the end of it. Whereas fruit that's not so good would distance people, right? Would drive that wedge between them and God and the church and Jesus, right? And if that's how we're thinking about fruit today, does it bear good fruit, help people grow in love with God and Jesus, or does it bear bad fruit, distance people from God and Jesus? I think we have to confess that, historically, the church hasn't borne a lot of really good fruit in the lives of people who are LGBTQ plus. There is the story of my friend Josh, for example, right? He had this great experience of God's love for him and brought it to the church and then felt distance as a result of it, right? Pushed away as a result of it. And his story is repeated countless times, right? After the very first service, several parents told me that their grown children are no longer connected to a church because of similar experiences. Maybe not in this church, but other churches. Now, sometimes churches may take slightly different approaches, but the results can still be very hurtful and harmful. Sometimes churches will say, well, we're not going to exclude people who are LGBTQ plus, but we're going to try to get them to change, right? We're going to try to kind of convert them, right? To kind of make them straight or cis, and so some churches will do that. But the truth is that kind of approach in ministry ends up being just as hurtful and harmful as well. Science and history and experience has shown that. Because if you are LGBTQ plus, or if you love someone who is, you know this already, it's not something you just choose. It's not something you can just change. It's just who you are, right? It's how you're put together, how God made you. And I don't care who we are, no matter who we are, if we try our best to pretend to be somebody that we're not, it never works in the end, and we just end up hating ourselves. And we end up hating the God and the church that we think is asking us to be somebody that we're not. The most striking example I can think of that is the story of Exodus International. Exodus International was the biggest organization in the world geared toward trying to change gay people, right? To convert gay people to a straight lifestyle. They were the biggest organization in the world with that purpose. And in 2013, they closed. And when they closed, they put out a statement. And their statement was this: we realize now that we have hurt many, many people. And we are so sorry. Right? We're so sorry for the hurt we've caused. If we need one more piece of evidence about kind of the harmful fruit that the church has often borne in the lives of people who are LGBTQ+, I want to share one more statistic. This is not an easy statistic to talk about, but it's important that we hear it in the church, I believe. And it's this. Did you know that being involved in a church reduces the rate of suicidal thoughts and suicidal attempts in every single demographic across the board, except one. Did you know that being involved in a church involvement decreases suicidal thoughts, suicidal attempts across the board in every single type of person except one? And that's persons who are LGBTQ+, especially young people. If you're a young person who's LGBTQ+, and you get involved in a church, statistically, that actually increases your chance of suicidal thoughts, suicidal attempts. Now, I should say, I don't believe that of this church, by the way, but statistically across the board, for churches in general, it's the one group of people that being involved in the church actually does more harm than good. I have known 2 young gay Christian men raised in the church who took their own lives. And I don't care whether we read one particular verse in the same way or not. I mean, surely we could all agree that that's just not good fruit, right? That's awful fruit. And what's worse is it's fruit that's being born in Jesus' name. Right? Jesus deserves the best kind of fruit we can offer. Fruit that helps people grow and connect in relationship with God, with Christ, with the church, with others. So what can we do, right? What can we do if we want to bear good fruit, love really well our neighbors here in Springfield? What can we do? Well, I want to offer just a couple of suggestions as we kind of wrap things up. Number one is kind of above and beyond specific kind of thing we can do. Not everyone's going to want to do it, and that's okay. But if you want to do a little bit above and beyond, you can stop by the Justice League table out in the fellowship hall as you leave today. Justice League is the name of our ministry, our social justice ministry here at Campebell United Methodist Church. Another reason I love Andy Bryant is that he named it Justice League. That's a fantastic name. And Justice League is collecting money for those who want to give to it, to provide them sponsoring a guest speaker at Missouri State on October 21st and 22nd. Her name is Amber Cantorna. She's talking about her experience of being a gay Christian, just to let young people who may be in a similar situation know that they're not alone and that they're loved and that they're valued. So not everyone's going to do that. That's okay. But if you want to, you can give to the Justice League sponsorship of that event. Well, a larger organization is Ecclesia, a campus ministry that is sponsoring that. Secondly, the one thing I think all of us can do, though, is just to learn from churches that are bearing good fruit among persons who are LGBTQ+, because there are churches that are bearing really good fruit. There are. I think of the Gathering United Methodist Church in St. Louis, for example. And the Gathering United Methodist Church has a wonderful ministry where people who are LGBTQ+ are growing in love of God, love of Christ, and love of the church. And what are they doing? What's their secret? Well, it's not really a big secret, right? They're just loving, accepting, fully persons who are LGBTQ+ for exactly who they are, without any kind of ulterior motive, right? Like secret desire to try to get them to pretend to be somebody that they're not. And it works. It bears good fruit, right? Persons there are growing in love of God, love of Christ, love of the church as a result of it. And you know what? This is the only method that works. Not only for gay people, but for straight people too. Right? If we are growing in love of God, love of Christ, love of the church, it's because someone just loved us for who we are and didn't ask us to try to be someone else. Which brings me to one final point here. Something about the Bible that is quite shocking and surprising. We don't talk about it very often, but I think it's important to remember, and it's this. There are verses in the Bible that can pretty much be used to exclude every single one of us in the room today. Whether we realize it or not, there are verses in the Bible that could be used pretty much to say that every single one of us should not be here today. There are verses in the Bible that people can use and have used to exclude women from worship or worship leadership, people with disabilities, people who are divorced, people who have a lot of money, wimpy men like me, people who like to play games, strike two, right? In fact, the truth is, unless you are a lower income, manly, ultra-Orthodox, Jewish, straight male who's never been divorced and who is in perfect health. Anybody in that category? There are verses in the Bible that people could use to say, you shouldn't be here today. And me too. And yet here we are, right? How did that happen? It happened because there were some bold fathers and mothers in the faith in generations gone by who said, you know what? It is more important to connect people like you and me to Jesus than anything else. That it is more important to connect all of us outsiders to Jesus than anything else. Even than adhering to a particular interpretation of a particular verse that might make us feel like we don't belong. We're here today, all of us, because generations gone by made that choice. And God's call for us today is simply to pass along the gift in a new generation, in a new day. Thanks be to God. Amen.